The Harvest of Iron celebration is loud and hot and smells like roasted meat and old wine. Alphaking Malachi has been drinking since sundown. His most decorated generals sit around him, the men who broke kingdoms so he could build one. He laughs at something General Varric says. He always laughs at what Varric says. Elara moves through the edges of the hall, the way smoke moves. Quiet. Low. Forgettable. 10 years she has carried trays in this place. 10 years of keeping her chin down, and her breathing even. 10 years of making sure none of them ever looked at her long enough to see what was behind her eyes. She stops near Prince Leo. He's maybe 8 years old, and he's reaching for a sweetmeat with the focused, unself-conscious greed that only children have. She almost smiles. Then her skin goes cold. She doesn't look for the weapon. She looks at the generals. General Varric, Malachi's vanguard, his right hand, the man the king broke bread with this very evening, gives a nod so small it would mean nothing to anyone who wasn't already watching for it. It means everything. A guardsman detaches from the shadows. His hand is already moving. The obsidian axe leaves his grip, and the air splits open, and Elara is already throwing herself across the boy before the sound of it catches up to her body. Thud, crack. The hall doesn't go quiet all at once. It goes quiet the way a fire goes out. The outer edges first, then the middle, then the last drunk voice trailing off into nothing until the only sound in the entire room is Leo's ragged little breath against Elara's collarbone. She's on her knees. The axe is buried in her shoulder. Sight, she can feel the obsidian head fracturing against her bone. Not cutting through, just breaking apart against her, like it struck something it was never made to touch. Her blood, when it falls, is the color of moonlight. It hits the stone floor and hisses. And then the lightning comes, gold and violent, crawling up her arms, burning 10 years of stable grime and careful invisibility off her skin in a single breath. She doesn't try to stop it. There's no point anymore. Malachi has gone completely still. He is staring at a girl he thought carried wine. He is watching mercury-silver light pool beneath her knees, watching her glow like something that was buried and is now, furiously, unburied. He knows what the blood means. He knew it the moment he saw it. The recognition hitting before the understanding, cold and total. Why, she is the last son of Solace, the last daughter of the kingdom he burned. He has been hunting her for a decade. She has been refilling his cup. He turns and looks at his generals. The daggers are out. Varric won't meet his eyes. The sweat on his temple says everything his silence won't. To one side, his cabinet, closing in, slow and certain. To the other, the girl who should be dead, bleeding light onto his floor, with his son's fists tangled in her ruined tunic. Your own hounds turned on you. She snaps the axe handle clean off with one hand. Elara continued. So tell me, King, who do you kill first? The girl who shouldn't be alive, or the brothers who want you dead? Malachi's hand moves to his sword. Stops. Leo doesn't let go of her tunic. Okay, real quick before we go further. My husband made me a deal. He said if this video gets me to 500 subscribers, he's buying me a car. A whole car. So if you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now. It's free, it takes 2 seconds. And honestly, you'd be doing this for me and die for the story. We're just getting started, and it's already this good. Don't leave. Everyone in the palace knew the servant girl with the gray eyes. Nobody knew her name. That was by design. Elara had spent 10 years building a version of herself that people looked through rather than at. Shoulders curved just enough, steps just quiet enough, expressions just blank enough. In a palace full of people performing loyalty and ambition, invisibility was the only armor that had never failed her. She had been 9 years old when Malachi's army came to Solace. Yea, she remembered the smell of it before she remembered the sight. Smoke and iron, carried on a wind that seemed wrong for the season. She remembered her mother's hands on her face, pressing hard, saying words Elara had spent a decade trying to unhear. You are the last one. You survive. That is all you do. And so she had. She learned which floorboards creaked near the king's study. She learned which guards traded posts early and which ones drank on duty. She learned the rhythms of the palace the way you learn a language, slowly, then all at once, until she was dreaming in it. She also learned something no one meant to teach her. Prince Leo was lonely, not the sad kind of lonely, the invisible kind, the kind that comes from being important to everyone and known by no one. His tutors taught him, his guards protected him. His father patted his head at feasts and forgot him by morning. Elara started leaving things, a pastry wrapped in cloth outside his door, a carved wooden horse she'd traded her supper for. Nothing that could be traced, nothing that required acknowledgement. But Leo noticed. Of course he noticed. Children always notice the things adults are too busy to see. He'd started watching for her at feasts, not in an obvious way, just a small turn of his head when she entered the hall, a private awareness that went both ways now. She told herself it was a mistake to let it happen. She let it happen anyway. General Varric had been patient for 11 years. He had watched Malachi take the throne that should have gone to a council. Watched him centralize power like a man hoarding warmth in winter, and pulling it all toward himself until the generals were ornaments, celebrated in public, consulted in private, trusted by neither. They had their titles. They had their medals. What they didn't have was power, and men like Varric felt that absence the way other men felt hunger. The plan had taken 2 years to build. It was elegant in the way that only truly dangerous things are, simple at the center, layered at the edges. The coup wouldn't look like a coup. It would look like grief. A king undone by the loss of his heir, too broken to rule, stepping aside for the stability of the realm. The cabinet would assume control. Temporarily, of course. It was always temporary with men like these. Varric had chosen the guardsman carefully. A man with a dead wife and 2 starving children and nothing left to lose. He'd been promised gold for his family. He believed it the way desperate men believe things. Completely, because the alternative was unbearable. What Varric hadn't accounted for was the servant girl. He had noticed her, vaguely, the way you notice furniture. Gray eyes, quiet feet, invisible by habit. He'd never once wondered what she was hiding because people like her weren't hiding anything. They were simply small, and small people didn't change the shape of history. He would think about that assumption for the rest of his life. When she moved, when she flew across that hall like something launched rather than running, his first thought was confusion. His second thought came when her blood hit the stone floor and hissed. His third thought didn't come at all. It was replaced by fear so pure it felt like ice water in his chest. Times he knew that blood. Every general from the old wars knew that blood. The hall was still holding its breath. Malachi crossed the floor in 8 steps and stood over Elara. She didn't flinch. She kept one arm around Leo and looked up at the king with eyes that had stopped pretending to be empty. He crouched down to her level. The generals behind him had gone very, very still. Barely above a whisper. How long? 10 years. Something moved across his face. Not rage, not triumph. Something worse. Something that looked almost like guilt. My men burned Solace. I gave the order. I know. You've been here, in my house, for 10 years, refilling your cup. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood, turned to face his generals, and drew his sword. The room assumed he was going to finish what they started. He didn't. He pointed the blade at Varric. On your knees. The silence cracked open. 2 of the generals lunged, and Malachi's personal guard, who had been watching the room rather than the king, moved to intercept. Steel rang against steel. The hall erupted. In the chaos, Elara pulled Leo close and stayed low, her wounded shoulder screaming, the golden lightning still crawling across her skin with nowhere to go. Then, Leo said something into her neck, so quiet she almost missed it. I knew. She went still. Not everything. But I knew you weren't just a servant. I found a book in the East Library, about Solace, about what the sun daughters looked like when their power came through. He pulled back enough to look at her face. I never told anyone. I didn't want them to find you, an 8-year-old boy, in a palace full of hunters. Had been quietly protecting her. I need 20 seconds of your time. My husband said he'd buy me a car if I hit 500 subscribers. I'm not even joking. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, please, do it for me. Do it for Elara. Do it for the car. The button is right there, and this story is about to get so much wilder. Don't miss it. By the time the hall was secured, 4 generals were in chains, and Varric was bleeding from a cut across his cheek that Malachi had put there personally. Elara had been moved to a side chamber. A healer, the king's own, had been sent to her. She'd refused to let go of Leo until Malachi himself came to the doorway and told her the hall was clear. She still didn't fully let go. She just loosened her grip. The healer worked in silence. The axe wound was deep, but the fracturing of the obsidian blade had done strange things. The edges were almost cauterized, like the power in her blood had sealed what the blade tried to open. It would scar. It would hurt for weeks. But it wouldn't kill her. Malachi dismissed everyone except his most trusted guard, then sat across from her. You saved his life. I noticed. Why? She looked at Leo, who had fallen asleep against the wall with his head on a rolled cloak, the way children fall asleep in the middle of disasters. Suddenly, completely, as though the world agreed to pause for them, because he's 8 years old, and none of this is his fault. Malachi was quiet for a moment. I could lock you in a tower. Let the cabinet think you're a prisoner, buy time to clean house. You could. Or I could send you away, out of the kingdom. You'd be free, no more hunting, and you'd have no idea where a sun daughter was or what she was building. He almost smiled at that. Or, and I recognize how unreasonable this sounds given our history, I could ask you to stay, willingly, as something other than a servant. Elara studied his face for a long time. As what, exactly? He glanced at Leo. He trusts you. In 11 years, I haven't seen him trust anyone. The offer hung between them, strange and fragile, like the first ice of winter that might hold your weight or might not. She didn't answer him that night. The interrogations began at dawn. Malachi was methodical about it, not cruel, just thorough, in the way that men who have built empires understand that information is more valuable than punishment. He wanted the whole shape of the conspiracy, not just its edges. What he got was worse than he expected. Varric talked. Not immediately and not easily, but he talked. Because the one thing Varric hadn't anticipated was getting caught. And caught men, in Elara's experience, almost always eventually talked. The coup had been 18 months in the making. It had fingers in the treasury, in the trade routes, in 3 of the 5 provincial councils. The guardsman with the axe was not the only blade they'd sharpened. He was just the first one. There were others still inside the palace walls. Elara heard this through the door of the chamber they'd put her in. Not because she was eavesdropping, but because the stone walls of old palaces carried sound in ways their builders never intended. She sat with her back against the cold wall, and her wounded shoulder aching, and thought about what it meant. It meant the king's house was not clean. It meant Leo was still in danger. It meant she had 2 choices: walk away into whatever freedom Malachi was offering, or stay in a burning building and help put out the fire. She already knew which one she was going to choose. She'd known it the moment Leo said, "I didn't want them to find you." What she hadn't decided yet was what she wanted in return. She was the last son of Solace. Her bloodline carried power that could split stone and shatter obsidian weapons. She was not, whatever she had spent 10 years pretending, a small person. Small people didn't negotiate. She stood up, rolled her good shoulder back, and went to find the king. She found him in the war room, alone for the first time since the feast. He looked exhausted in the specific way that leaders look exhausted. Not physically tired, but hollowed out, like the weight of the last 12 hours had taken something from him that sleep couldn't put back. He looked up when she came in. Didn't seem surprised. "You've decided. I have conditions." Of course you do. She sat across from him without being invited and put her hands flat on the table. The families of Solace who survived. I know some of them are in labor camps in the eastern provinces. They're released, all of them, within 30 days. He held her gaze. Done. The Sun Temple ruins. They don't get quarried for stone. They stay standing. Done. And Leo gets a real education, not just military history and tax policy. He learns about Solace, about what happened. The real version, not the one you had written. That one cost him something. She could see it. Done. In exchange, I stay. I help you find whoever Varric left inside these walls. And I keep Leo safe until you've cleaned house. And after? She looked at him steadily. After, we figure out what after looks like. Together. Like people who have stopped lying to each other. He extended his hand across the table. For a moment, she just looked at it. This hand that had signed the order to burn her home, extended toward her now in something that was trying, haltingly, to be peace. She shook it. 3 days into the investigation, Elara found it. Not through interrogation, through habit. 10 years of moving quietly through places people forgot she was in. She'd been tracing the money, the thread of gold that had funded 18 months of treason. Yeah, following it the way you follow a route to its source. It didn't lead to Varric's accounts. It led to the Queen Mother's. Lady Sarin, Malachi's mother, the woman who had stood at his shoulder for every public ceremony for 20 years, who organized the harvest feasts and managed the palace household and smiled warmly at Leo every time he passed, had been the one writing the letters. Varric hadn't planned the coup. He'd been handed it. Elara sat in the archive room with the correspondence spread in front of her and felt the specific chill of a puzzle that suddenly makes terrible sense. Lady Sarin had never wanted Leo on the throne. That much became clear quickly, reading between the careful lines of her letters. Leo was Malachi's son by his first wife. A political marriage, cold and brief. Lady Sarin had a second son, a younger one. Kept quiet, kept distant, raised in a province 3 days' ride from the capital. The coup wasn't meant to destroy the throne. It was meant to redirect it. Kill Leo, break Malachi, let grief do the rest of the work, and position the younger son, quietly, patiently, as the only viable heir. Elara read the letters twice to make sure. Then she sat there for a long time, thinking about Lady Sarin's warm smile and Leo's lonely eyes, and the particular cruelty of betrayal that wears a grandmother's face. Then she went to find Malachi. She didn't know how to tell a man that his mother had tried to have his son murdered. She told him anyway. She expected rage. What she got was silence, the long, terrible kind that lives in the space between hearing something and believing it. Malachi sat with the letters in front of him and didn't move for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat in the way voices go flat when emotion runs too deep for expression. She was at the feast. Yes. She kissed Leo's head when he came in. I watched her do it. I know. He pushed the letters away, stood up, walked to the window, and put both hands on the stone ledge and looked out at the courtyard where the morning training was happening, guards running drills in the pale early light, everything ordinary and completely changed. She built this empire with me. Every hard choice I made, she was the one who told me it was necessary, that it was strength. He turned back. His eyes were red at the edges but dry. Burning Solace. She said it was necessary. Elara went very still. I gave the order. I own that. See, I will always own that. But the counsel to do it came from her. The room between them shifted. Not forgiveness. It was nowhere near forgiveness, and both of them knew it. But something. A fracture in the clean shape of the story Elara had been carrying for 10 years. The one where Malachi was the single source of everything she'd lost. It didn't make him innocent. It made the truth messier, and heavier, and more human than she'd allowed it to be. What are you going to do? He turned back to the window. What I should have done with Varric. What I should have been doing all along. He picked up the letters. The truth, all of it. No more clean stories. Okay, I genuinely need you right now. My husband promised me a car. An actual car, if I reach 500 subscribers, and we are so close I can almost hear the engine. If this story has kept you up, if you're invested in Elara and Leo, and this whole messy, complicated world, subscribe, tell a friend, share this video. Help me get to 500 and help me get that car. I promise the rest of this story is worth it. Lady Seren was confined to her chambers by the king's own decree. No chains, Malachi couldn't bring himself to that, not yet. But 2 guards on the door, and her correspondence cut off completely. The palace moved around the absence of her influence, like water around a pulled stone, slowly, unsurely. Leo was told only that there had been a threat, and it had been handled. He was 8. The full shape of it could wait. Elara had argued for that, and Malachi had agreed without much pushing, which told her something about the kind of father he was trying to become. She found Leo in the East Library. Of course she did. He was sitting in the window, with a book open in his lap, but his eyes on the courtyard. The look on his face, the particular kind of far away, that meant he was thinking about something too big for him, and doing it alone. She sat beside him. Neither of them spoke for a while. The library was warm and smelled like old paper, and the candles had burned low, and it felt, just for a moment, like nothing was on fire anywhere. Are you leaving? No? Even though you could? Even though I could? He thought about that. Because of my father? She looked at him, this careful, lonely, surprisingly perceptive boy, who had hidden her secret in his chest for however long he'd known it, who had reached for her tunic in the chaos of the hall and simply held on. Because of you. Leo didn't say anything. He just leaned slightly sideways until his shoulder was against her arm, the way children offer comfort when they don't have the words for it yet. She let him. Outside, the palace went on doing what palaces do, maneuvering and mourning and slowly, imperfectly, trying to clean house. But in the library for now, it was just the 2 of them, the last son of Solace and the boy she'd decided, without being asked, to protect. She had spent 10 years surviving. She thought she might try something else for a while. The younger son's name was Kale. Elara found that out on the same day Malachi's scouts confirmed what the letters had only implied, that Kale had known. Not everything, and not from the beginning, but enough. Enough to have said something and chosen not to. He was 17. See, he'd been raised in Thornwall Province by a garrison commander who owed Lady Seren favors. He was, by all accounts, quiet and studious and careful. Nothing like a schemer. Everything like someone who had been carefully prepared for a role he hadn't fully chosen. Malachi wanted to bring him to the capital. Elara thought that was the worst idea she'd heard since she agreed to work in the palace that burned her home. You bring him here and you make him a symbol. Every person who wanted a different heir now has a face to rally around. He's 17 and alone in a province. He's 17 and alone in a province, and his mother just got confined for treason. Don't underestimate what grief and resentment can build in a boy who has nothing left to lose. Malachi looked at her for a long moment. You know something about that. I know everything about that. She had been 17 once, in a ruined kingdom, with nothing left and a choice about what to do with the anger. She had chosen patience. She had chosen invisibility. She had survived. Not everyone made that choice. Send someone he doesn't know is yours. Someone young. Someone who can just listen first. Find out who he actually is before you decide what to do with him. And if he's dangerous? She thought about a boy pressing himself into her side in a burning hall, holding on because he had no one else. She thought about how differently that story could have gone. Then we deal with it. Carefully. Like people who are trying not to create another 10 years of problems. He agreed. She was starting to understand that this was how it was going to be. Not clean, not resolved. But the 2 of them sitting across from each other and negotiating the shape of what came next, and that being a strange and uncomfortable and possibly necessary thing. Not trust. Not yet. but the beginning of something that might become it. The healer said the scar would run from her shoulder blade to her collarbone. Elara looked at it in the small bronze mirror in her chamber. Her actual chamber now, not a cot in the servants' quarters, and thought about what it meant to carry a mark like that. Proof of a moment, evidence of a choice. She didn't hate it. Her power had been surfacing in odd ways since the feast. Small things, mostly. Warmth in her palms when she was angry. Silver threading through her eyes in low light, just enough for Leo to notice and pretend he hadn't. Once, ceased when a guard had grabbed her arm roughly in a corridor before recognizing her. The stone floor beneath her feet had cracked in a perfect circle. She was going to need to learn how to manage it properly. That much was clear. The problem was, there was no one left to teach her. The sun daughters of Solace were gone. Her mother, her aunts, the elder women who had carried this bloodline through generations. The libraries Malachi's army hadn't burned were the ones that had never contained anything useful, which meant she would have to figure it out herself. That felt right, actually. Familiar. She had spent 10 years figuring out survival without a guide. This was just a different kind of the same problem. Leo knocked on her door that evening with a stack of books he'd pulled from the East Archive. Everything the palace library had on Solace, on Sunblood, on powers that older kingdoms had documented and newer ones had tried to forget. He dropped them on her table with the focused energy of someone who has decided to be useful. "I've been collecting these for 2 years." She looked at the stack, then at him. 2 years? I thought someone should. She sat down and pulled the top book toward her. He sat across from her and opened one of his own. Outside the window, the capital moved through its evening. Fires lit, bells rung, the ordinary machinery of a kingdom that didn't yet know how close it had come to breaking. Inside, a girl who had survived by making herself invisible began, very quietly, to read herself back into existence. The message came on a Tuesday, tucked inside a trade dispatch from the southern ports. It was written in a language that hadn't been spoken in 11 years. The formal script of Solace, taught only to those born inside its walls. 3 people in the known world could read it fluently. 2 of them were dead. Elara read it twice, then burned the outer paper and kept only the inner sheet, pressed flat against her palm. "We know you're alive. We've been waiting. The sun doesn't belong in a king's palace. Come home. What's left of it is enough to start." The remaining, she sat with it for a long time. Someone had survived. More than one someone. People who knew her language, who had found her, who had been watching and waiting and building something in the ash of Solace while she'd been carrying trays in the place that made the ash. Or she should have felt joy. Some part of her did. The larger part felt the weight of what this meant, the choice it was putting in front of her again, the way this story kept returning her to the same door and asking her to decide what she wanted from the other side of it. She could go. She could walk out of this palace, find her people, rebuild what was hers by birthright. The power in her blood was already pulling at her, increasingly impatient, as if it had spent 10 years waiting for her to remember what she was. Or she could stay. She thought about Malachi's hand across the table. The letters from his mother, the fracture in the clean shape of her grief. She thought about Leo, 2 years of collected books. "I didn't want them to find you." She folded the letter carefully and put it inside the cover of the first Solace book Leo had found for her. Then she went to find the king, not because she'd decided yet, because they had agreed to stop keeping things from each other. That had to mean something. End of Volume 1. Series note. The Mercury crown continues in Volume 2, where Elara must choose between a throne that was stolen from her and the unlikely. If you want Volume 2, comment Part 2 in the comment section.